Welcome to Sustainable San Mateo County's third annual Youth for Climate Policy event. We're so happy you could join us for this hour, packed with information and advice about how you can make a difference in your local community. I'm Sarah Hubbard, Executive Director of Sustainable San Mateo County, and we're honored to host tonight's incredible panelists. Tonight, we have a lot to cover before 6 p.m. We'll start off with a brief introduction to Sustainable San Mateo County, highlight the importance of local advocacy, then hear from our four panelists about their experience with environmental justice and local advocacy. Then we'll have time for you all to ask your panelists your burning questions and close things off with upcoming events and closing thoughts. Before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to the many promotional partners that we've had for this event, and a special thank you to Peninsula Clean Energy for sponsoring this webinar. PCE has been a strong supporter of environmental justice efforts. Their renewable energy projects benefit underserved communities by providing clean, affordable energy that reduces pollution and creates local jobs. Their community grant program, which SSMC is part of, provides much needed funding to local organizations focused on environmental justice. These organizations work with communities that have been underserved and subject to a disproportionate amount of pollution and climate change impacts. So let me share a bit about Sustainable San Mateo County. SSMC is a nonprofit organization formed more than 30 years ago to ensure that the region protects the environment while it supports an equitable and thriving economy. These three E's, the environment, the economy, and social equity, have always been at the core of SSMC's mission and vision. Each of SSMC's programs connect to its others, like pieces of a puzzle. We provide information through collecting and displaying more than 90 sustainability metrics across 12 topics in our sustainability dashboard. We suggest policy and program solutions through the Sustainability Ideas Bank, and we provide a deep dive into one topic each year through the Indicators Report. Our annual sustainability awards highlight local achievements and inspire community action. This year, we celebrated our 26th annual awards in April. And finally, we focus on advocacy. Our online webinars and roundtable discussions are a few of the ways we advocate for sustainability throughout the county. Now, you may have noticed the missing puzzle piece at the bottom of our logo. That's where we leave space for you, a critical piece of the advocacy puzzle and our focus for tonight. Advocacy is one of the most impactful ways you can make a difference on climate change and environmental justice. Today's learning objectives are to understand how local governments influence environmental decisions and why youth advocacy is essential in this context. Advocacy includes a range of activities done in support of a cause or policy. Environmental justice is just one of the things people advocate for. Others include food security, affordable housing, transportation improvements, healthcare access, and more. Educating others and increasing their awareness of an issue or need is one form of advocacy. Another involves community engagement, such as attending and speaking at meetings, sending letters to educate and urge action, and forming groups in support of your issue. And finally, advocacy can include drafting policy proposals and meeting with officials. We encourage all of you to ask questions of our panelists tonight and learn more about the advocacy methods you're most interested in. I've really seen that youth bring fresh perspectives and urgency to environmental issues, and that decision makers, whether in local governments or school boards, really take notice of engaged young voices. Tonight, our advocacy focus is environmental justice. That means making sure that everyone, no matter where they live, their race, income, or background, has the right to a clean, safe, and healthy environment. Unfortunately, not all communities are treated equally when it comes to environmental protection. Some neighborhoods, often home to low-income families or communities of color, may experience more pollution, have less access to green space, or face greater risks from climate change. Environmental justice is about recognizing these unfair differences and working to fix them. As young advocates, you have the power to speak up, share stories, and take action to ensure that everyone can enjoy a healthy environment. We've invited 4 speakers to share their experiences with advocacy and environmental justice and to answer your questions. I'll introduce each briefly and give them a few minutes to talk about their experience. Then we'll ask a few questions. And finally, we'll give you, as the participants, the opportunity to ask questions. First up is Kamille Lang, the Resilient Leadership Program Manager for Climate Resilient Communities. She has a BS in Environmental Management and Protection from Cal Poly Humboldt, with an emphasis in environmental education and a minor in marine science. She is currently pursuing an MBA and MPA at the University of Redlands in San Anselmo, California. Prior to this role, Kamille led youth climate action programs through San Mateo County's Office of Sustainability. Kamille, take it away.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. And thanks everyone that wanted to talk about this tonight. This is incredible to see so many people on the call. So like Sarah said, my name is Kamille. I work at Climate Resilient Communities. And Climate Resilient Communities is a grassroots environmental justice nonprofit that's centered to hold on to the needs of communities at the front line of climate change. I'm going to say the word front line a lot, so let me just unpack that really quick. But when we're at the front line of climate change, you're already seeing the impacts of climate change first and worst compared to other communities that might be right on the other side of the highway, just down the bay from you. And so CRC is really situated to serve frontline communities and make sure that their voices are a part of the process to have climate adaptation projects happen in their community and like see real tangible action that's community led to address these huge environmental problems. At Climate Resilient Communities, we think about environmental justice with these 3 pillars. Like, I know you can Google search and see what the EPA says is environmental justice, but I just want to add a little bit more perspective to what that is from the work that we get to do at Climate Resilient Communities, or CRC. So Sarah did a great introduction to what environmental justice is. It isn't just about the environment. It's about fairness, democracy, and who gets to thrive. At its core, environmental justice stands on 3 pillars: distributional, substantive justice. Understanding these 3 pillars helps us see why advocacy is so urgent and where we can focus our efforts on together. So distributional justice, what I mean by that is it's asking who gets the benefits and who bears the burdens of our society's way of producing and consuming. The current systems that we see in the United States have a lot of pollution, toxic waste, and climate risks that are not shared equally. Climate change, unfortunately, is not equitable. So annoying. We see that the marginalized communities that are often low income and communities of color are exposed to far more environmental harm. This inequity is not an accident. It's built into our economic and social systems. There's something called redlining that was a government decision made 50 years ago that is impacting communities still. And so when we're deciding where folks are allowed to live and where we're pushing neighborhoods into, there was a decision that was made with redlining that we're going to put folks of color, folks that are a lower income status, in these communities that have contaminated sites, unnecessary air pollution burden, and it just like enhances this exposure risk. And now those are the frontline communities that are seeing climate impacts like sea level rise. It's not fair, it's wrong, and we need to address it. The second pillar I wanted to share was procedural justice, thinking about who gets a say. Procedural justice asks who is included in the decisions about our environment. More often than not, at this point in history, those that are most affected by pollution and climate change are excluded from the democratic process that shapes their neighborhoods because of a lack of wealth, power, or because of systemic oppressions. The amount of money that you're making should not have anything to do with how you get to advocate and say for what you want to see in your community. Real justice requires that everyone, especially those in the front lines, have a meaningful voice and power in the decision-making process. A lot of folks don't know you can join your city council meetings and tell them for 2 minutes what you think about what's going on in your city and the barriers that exist to make sure that create that inaccess are seen much deeper in the communities that we serve at CRC. The third pillar I wanted to talk about is substantive justice, asking like, what's the outcome here? It's about the actual conditions people live in. there are some communities that are forced to bear extreme and unjust pollution burdens, and we can't let that continue. That's when we see environmental justice, is when we stop those outcomes. These outcomes are a result of our collective choices and our collective exclusions. Addressing this means not just talking about fairness, but actually redistributing power and resources so everyone can live in a healthy, safe environment. So, as a historic advocate, Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. If we want real change, we must demand it by organizing, speaking up, and ensuring that justice is designed by and for those who have been left behind already. Who decides what is fair and who is left behind tells us exactly where justice must be prioritized. At CRC, we put these pillars into practice with the work that we do. We redistribute environmental benefits, bringing like green infrastructure, like rain gardens, into communities that have historic flooding risk. And we also bring climate resilience to under-resourced neighborhoods. So folks are saying, like, I'm really concerned about, like, do I have what I need in my go bag for the next natural disaster? And we say, like, yes, come to this workshop. Let's make sure your go bag's prepared. And we're going to talk about climate change and why this might happen more frequently in your neighborhood in the future. We center community voices, ensuring those that are most impacted are leading planning and solutions. We do this in a few different ways where we're never entering a room in the community saying, I know what's best in your community and here's what we're going to do. We always lead with the curiosity of saying, tell me about the last time it flooded. Tell me about the last time the power went out. And asking for folks to share where they already know their resilience lies and what they want to see change in their communities so they're more resilient in the future. We also measure our success by the change outcomes in our communities. I'm like actively fighting for different policies along with my team and making sure that the projects that the policies deliver in our communities are real, tangible, and yield direct improvements in people's lives. So we're not saying we're going to do another study about air quality in these communities. We're actually doing something about the air quality issues. So in closing, I just wanted to share that the environmental justice is by design. Environmental justice is about redesigning our systems so no one is left out. The 3 pillars that I shared remind us that it's not just about where pollution goes, but who gets to decide and what outcomes we demand of our communities. So I encourage you to join me and keep fighting with us to keep pushing forward for a future where justice is not just an afterthought, but the foundation of everything we do. So thank you. I'll hand it back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Kamille. I really appreciate that. Thank you for diving a little deeper into the meaning of environmental justice and the 3 pillars and telling us more about what CRC is doing to address that. Let me share my screen again and move on to our next speaker. So next up is Julia Zeitlin. Julia is a first-year undergraduate at Stanford University, majoring in environmental systems engineering, focusing on sustainable urban systems. She's also a climate activist and co-founder of the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition. She has worked for the Palo Alto Public Works Department in the Office of Sustainability and plays an active role on Palo Alto's Climate Adaptation and Protection Working Group. Julia directed the 2024 Bay Area heat mapping campaign with NOAA and is working to implement solutions to protect the Bay Area community from extreme heat. Julia, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here today speaking alongside these incredible leaders and advocates in the climate movement. I first got involved in the climate justice movement when I was in 7th grade, a year after I moved to California from Connecticut. In that same year, in the fall, the Camp Fire struck, completely destroying the town of Paradise, California. And as I was breathing in the smoke from this fire, I realized I can't wait until I've graduated high school and become a working person to have an impact on this issue. I need to do something about it here and now. And so, next slide, please. I joined the Sunrise Movement, a youth-led climate justice organization credited with starting the movement for the Green New Deal. And the image on the right you can see is actually the first protest that I ever led. It was a march to Congresswoman Anna Eshoo's office in downtown Palo Alto. And when we got to her office, we weren't sure what was going to happen, but she welcomed us into her office. And we actually engaged in a constructive dialogue and conversation with her. And this was a really powerful moment for me as a young person to be able to see that my voice does matter and I can have an impact. And so after several more years of continuing to work in climate justice activism with the Sunrise Movement, engaging in protests and demonstrations, as I entered high school, I wanted to think about how I could be the most effective leader in climate possible. And I saw an opportunity to have a more tangible impact examining local climate policy. And so I looked into what was, back please, what was happening in Palo Alto. And I discovered that Palo Alto has been a progressive leader in climate for many, many years. But what I also noticed is that in recent years, our greenhouse gas emissions have remained relatively stagnant, and we've had trouble achieving the reductions needed to meet our climate goals. And so with that, I saw a huge opportunity to bring students from schools across the city together to build the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition, to train them in the history of climate policy in Palo Alto, and to give them the tools and the confidence to speak at a city council meeting and engage in direct advocacy with our local leaders. In my junior year of high school, we spoke at almost every single city council meeting of the year, always proposing new ideas and policy recommendations that could help the council achieve its climate goals. I would say our team was instrumental in helping pass Palo Alto's heat pump water heater electrification program, as well as strict green building reach codes that help Palo Alto reduce its natural gas emissions, the second largest source of emissions in the city, as well as help Palo Alto pass its goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. And on the right, we have an image of students on our team who helped bring the first electric school buses to the school district. And through this experience and this work, we showed Palo Alto and the surrounding community the value and importance of bringing youth voices into the conversation surrounding climate. And we built community trust and showed them that youth need to be in these conversations. And with that, we proposed and created Palo Alto's first ever official Youth Climate Advisory Board, an official body of students. Next slide, please. This is our official logo on the next slide, where we bring students throughout the city into the municipal climate policy process, show them how policy actually works, how we get things done at the local level, and give them an opportunity to provide feedback on city programs. And so I'd just like to conclude by saying that we're very excited about this milestone with this advisory board, and we hope it serves as a model for cities, for students in other cities who might not have something like this. And we hope that this gives you the confidence and the assurance that your voice is needed, your perspective is needed, and if there isn't something like this, we want you to build it. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, for sharing your story. Your voice really does matter, and I'm so glad that you didn't wait until after high school to get involved in climate advocacy. I'm now honored to welcome Davina Hurt. She is an attorney, former mayor of Belmont, and a distinguished public servant dedicated to advancing climate justice, clean air policy, consumer protection, and environmental sustainability. She was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom and confirmed by the Senate to serve on the board of the California Air Resources Board. She brings nearly a decade of experience as an elected local official, commissioner, board member, and more. I look forward to hearing Davina's insights related to advocacy and justice. Davina?
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate the introduction and the invitation to be here with all of you. And we'll go on to the next slide. The ocean connects us. not just land and water, but something deeper. It binds us through shared challenges, collective responsibility, and a common future. Even for those who live far from the shore, our daily actions flow into the sea, literally and figuratively. Cars, trucks, buses, they leak oil and shed rubber and emit toxins. Next slide. Ships, massive engines of global commerce. They burn heavy fuel oil, they release exhaust into the air and wastewater into the sea, impacting marine ecosystems and coastal communities alike. And when it rains, pollutants from our roads, industrial zones wash into the storm drains, rivers, and ultimately into the ocean. Yet transportation is just one piece, and why I worked so hard as a board member at the California Air Resources Board, but also many years as a former mayor and a council member with cities and counties, as they were needing to grow to create homes, connect cities, often underinvested in transit, over-consuming, and really unchecked use of natural resources. So there were a lot of efforts made to plan for the future effectively. And while climate change affects everyone, as we heard earlier, the burden isn't shared equally. And I just want to point out on this slide, all those dots that you see are ships from a satellite tracker, and they all emit heavy smoke and pollution into the air. And that's just our global trade. Imagine once it gets onto land, all the different dots we would see. So the impact is huge and we need to be accountable. Next slide. Some communities, particularly low income families, immigrants, and people of color are hit first and worst. They live near highways, ports, and factories. They breathe dirtier air. They have fewer parks and more vulnerable to floods and heat. As was said, not by accident, but by design. Climate change is a massive systematic change that is required that includes behavior change and structural reform, both at once. And sometimes these forces clash, but the winner is the one who can explain in plain language the complexity of the moment, envision a future worth fighting for, design a roadmap that marries the science and lived experiences, and speak to affordability, a conversation too often used as a shield instead of a sword for justice. And this is where, next slide, SB 1000 comes in. California passed this landmark law in 2016 to make equity part of how cities and counties plan their future. SB 1000 requires governments to identify environmental justice communities, integrate equity into general plans, reduce pollution exposure, and then expand access to clean air, housing, transit, parks, and safe water. It transforms aspiration into obligation, and it asks us to name the harm and then act to repair it. And we've seen strong examples of this right here in San Mateo County. East Palo Alto is engaging in renters and youth to tackle flooding, illegal dumping, and green space access. In South San Francisco, they're reducing industrial encroachment and factoring air quality into land use decisions. Menlo Park is using pollution maps to prioritize equitable infrastructure investments. And the county itself has developed an environmental justice element toolkit, a model for how regional governments can support meaningful change that shares standards and resources. And while I sat as the chair at the Association of Cities, Counties of Government of San Mateo, we also created an environmental justice toolkit to manage our work. Next slide. But tools like SB 100 are only strong as the hands that use them. Right now, the environmental justice movement needs political will matched by institutional humility. We can't keep doing equity theater, using the language of justice, but refusing to change course. That's why we must launch this environmental justice group to hold different boards accountable all over. We did so at the Bay Area Air District. As I sat as chair, we built a racial equity lens into data, permitting, enforcement, and decision-making, showing where harms exist and who still pay for it. Long-term investments in frontline communities must also be made. Groups on the ground need resourcing, not just consultation. They need to co-govern, not be invited in after decisions are made. Equity work requires consistency, not just crisis response. I grew up in Gary in East Chicago, Indiana, where environmental injustice had a smell. You could taste it before you saw the smokestacks from the refineries and the steel mills. They shaped everything that came after. Later, I attended Baylor University, had a bumper sticker that said, "Question authority. Some things are not always as they appear." That questioning spirit led me from medicine to law and eventually to environmental governance, because the clean air, clean water, and livable climates are not guaranteed. They are built by folks just like you, and they are defended and they are fought for. Next slide. I've learned that data alone doesn't move people. Stories do. Science tells us what's happening. Stories tell us why it matters. At the COP, I saw what happens when you combine both lived experience with rigorous science. That's when decision makers stop debating and they start acting, as Kamille talked about. As Ruha Benjamin said, imagine and craft the worlds you cannot live without, just as you dismantle the worlds you cannot live within. This is what this work demands. Next slide. I live in a cleaner place now than when I grew up as a small child. But I still ask myself, what am I doing to build the future I say I believe in? Environmental justice is not about guilt. It's about reflection, responsibility, and reckoning. So I ask all of you, what was your moment? When did you first realize that something wasn't right with the air, water, or land around you? Wherever you are on your journey, we can move forward together, because the ocean connects us and justice binds us. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Davina. I really appreciate you sharing your story, telling us a little bit about SB 1000 and its shortfalls, and really inspiring everyone here to take action. It's a pleasure. So last but certainly not least, we have Audra Lowe. Audra is a junior at the Nueva School and is passionate about climate education, clean energy, and environmental justice. As co-lead of the Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action San Mateo County team, she has organized clean energy panel discussions, developed environmental education workshops, and partnered with local government to advocate for sustainable policy solutions. Audra believes in the power of the youth voice and hopes to inspire others to prioritize the climate crisis and push against systems that threaten a just and sustainable future. Audra will also be the moderator for our panel discussion today. Audra, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Audra Lowe. I'm a junior at the Nueva School, and I'm also the co-lead for the San Mateo County team for Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action. I'm super excited to be here with everybody here today and kind of discuss how youth can get involved in supporting policies that encourage climate equity and environmental justice. I first got involved in climate action because I saw firsthand how climate issues aren't just about the environment, they're about the people. And this was on September 9th in 2020 when I woke up to an orange sky basically blanketed over our entire neighborhood. And that's when I felt like I didn't recognize our world today. And that's when I recognized I had to make some type of change to what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And that's when I researched and looked for environmental nonprofits to work at to empower my voice and to try to make a change in my community. And that's where I found Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action. And SVYCI, which is the acronym for Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, empowers teens and young adults to kind of put climate change and climate crisis at the forefront of their minds and make solutions and empower other teens to do the same as well.
And through my work at Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, I've had the great opportunity to work with other youth that are also super inspired and super passionate about the same things I am passionate about, whether it's clean energy, bike lanes and supporting bike lanes, or climate education. We've been able to kind of promote these initiatives throughout the past couple of years. Sarah, if you can move to the next slide, that'd be great. Yeah. Here are a few photos of some of the initiatives we've been working on for the past year and a half, I would say. And one of the most meaningful projects that, or most recent projects that I've been working on, is our collaboration with Dr. Lisa Patel, who you can see in the photo on the bottom right or bottom left. And we got the opportunity to kind of talk with her, and she is a pediatrician, but she also knows a lot about climate health. So I got to learn about the impacts of gas stoves on our health and how it can increase your chance of asthma, as well as how the increase in heat is also bad for elders and other people in our communities. So it was really interesting to talk to her. And we also released a campaign in collaboration with her and have a few videos that how youth can get involved and learn more about climate health and how climate change can affect people's well-being. And then also in April, on the top left photo, my team was honored to receive a proclamation from the Menlo Park City Council in recognizing Earth Day, but also the work our team has done in advocating for sustainable policies in Menlo Park. And this was really powerful for me, honestly, because it got to show how when you speak up, adults will listen and city council will listen. So that's one of my messages for today is speak up, because most of the time adults will listen and they will hear your voice. So thank you, Sarah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Audra. Now we'll move on to the moderated Q&A. I'll stop sharing screens, and Audra, you can begin with the questions.
Yeah, so we're gonna kind of move into a structured Q&A to start with. I have questions for each of our great panelists, and then we have a question that everybody can weigh in at the end. We'll start with Kamille. Our first question is, how can students identify the biggest areas of need for environmental justice advocacy? How can they learn about the different needs?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's great to have all this insight in the same room. I think what Davina mentioned earlier really struck me of wait, you can taste it before you see it. And so like I think that if you can lead with that, like what do you already notice? What do you already see happening in your community? That's the place to start. And like maybe that's you like kind of tapping into a special interest you have, or like getting more organized in a space you've been curious about. It's not necessarily this huge magical lift. You have to do so many steps to get there. Just tap into what you care about. What do you taste? What do you smell? What do you see? And how do you want to get more organized? I also think there's a lot of benefit. At least I learn a lot more when I'm actually out walking in a community and talking to people. And so I'd say like if you can and feel comfortable and empowered to do it in person, do it in person. It's probably going to be a space where you'll embrace a little vulnerability, but you'll learn a lot in the process. Like I said, it's just asking people questions. Sometimes I'll be standing at a grocery store, one of the 2 grocery stores in East Palo Alto, and just listening to what the conversation is in front of me. And it's usually in Spanish, and trying to understand like, what are they talking about? And they're usually complaining about how hard it was to get to the grocery store and that this one didn't have what they needed, right? And so that's what I would recommend. Like be there in person, walk around, listen closely, and then also tap into what you already care about and let that lead you.
Thank you, Kamille. That's such great advice. I guess we'll move on to Davina. Our question for you is, in general, how can students best influence their city's policies? For example, writing letters, attending board meetings, speaking at board meetings, or building relationships with council members.
Yeah, so I always suggest to start local, start right in your backyard, and remember, I think Kamille said it too, what's the passion that you have? You don't need to have a title, you just need to dig into that power. And I think, showing up at city council and board meetings is important. Someone said it earlier, you get 2 minutes to say what's on your mind. And you don't always have to go there complaining about anything. You could, in fact, talk about something amazing that's happening and then follow it up with some things that you think could be better and tell your story, share it. And I will tell you, officials remember people, not just data. So to come and give them a ton of data at the start is not always the right way to do it. So building relationships with council members is important too. Ask them out for coffee. Tell them that there's an issue that's really important to you. There's planning commissioners, city staff that you can also do that with. Send them an email. That also goes a long way if you can't get out and about. Organize with your friends. You know, we see the very obvious marches, right? And they are important. They play an important role. But sometimes just a couple of friends to go have a conversation with the city council member also goes a long way. And people should remember that cities have commission roles and committee roles that youth can also apply for and serve and shape the discussion. Policy is really personal. The more your city hears from you, the harder it is to ignore you. And I think that is the important thing to be left with. And there is no one right way. Just raise your voice and let people hear what you're thinking.
Yeah. Do you mind if I add to that?
Definitely, go ahead.
I think like what I heard is a common theme for all of us too. We found like that right next step was like, I don't really know exactly how to do it, but maybe this one organization might be able to help me there. So if you're not ready to go to city council yet, that's okay. The CRC is here, right? The Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action's here. Like there's a lot of folks that want to just get more people involved too. So I think there's a lot of first steps to getting to that, like coffee with your council member and you know, explaining and advocating with your friends. So Samantha agrees, apparently. So
Definitely. And I want to echo Davina's words of that policy is personal, and exercising your voice at city council is the best way to make your point heard and make your story heard. We'll move on to Julia. What advice do you have for youth who want to get involved? And what have you learned about having the most impact?
Well, I would say first off that this issue can be incredibly overwhelming and very challenging to tackle at times. I know when I first learned about the climate crisis and started really seeing the climate disasters that were occurring and seeing the impacts of the climate crisis, not just as solitary events in a vacuum, but as a part of this larger global issue, that can put one in a very dark place. I know especially a lot of my friends, my young friends, after this most recent presidential election, were feeling really apathetic towards the current state of the world. And I understand those emotions, but I also know that letting these feelings turn into apathy and is unproductive. And we need to channel these feelings of grief and anger into action. And so I would say it's wonderful to have young people excited about taking action. And I would also echo what everyone here is saying, that I can't stress enough the importance of and power of local action. We think of climate as such a large, global, massive issue, but the truth is there is a huge impact that you can have at the local level. And I've seen this through the work of the Palo Alto Student Climate Coalition. It's really incredible, and I've maintained a lot of hope through actually visually seeing the impact that we've had on the community. And so I would say, look at your school. Do you have a green team and environmental club? If not, maybe think about starting one, getting some friends together to start that. And then I would also say, very much encourage students to go to city council meetings. I know oftentimes council members are hearing from the same folks, usually maybe older. And so your voice definitely has a lot of say. And so I would encourage you to use that platform.
Definitely. Thank you, Julia. And now we're going to open it up to all three of you guys to answer this last question, which kind of focuses in on environmental justice, which is our kind of theme for today. So specifically for environmental justice, what should students focus on? Are there specific programs/policies to focus on or specific ways to take action and influence these exact policies?
I can start. One of the projects that I manage at Climate Resilient Communities is advancing environmental justice elements to all general plan policies. In 2016, the state mandated that each jurisdiction, like a city or a county, if they have high social vulnerability in their communities based off of state data, then they have to add an environmental justice element to their plan. I know this is all like nerdy government stuff, so bear with me. It gets interesting. So this is happening in our communities. It's happening all around the peninsula now, where certain jurisdictions are now starting to develop their environmental justice element and adopt it as part of their general plan. This is a really awesome opportunity to say like, hey, I want to help with that. I'm here to like help explain it in my community. You should get paid for your time if you're going to work for a city jurisdiction, though. Let's talk about that. But yeah, so the environmental justice element is a unique piece of a general plan and is mandated policy by the state that folks are having to do now. I highly encourage you look up and see if your community has an environmental justice element. Oh, thank you, Terry. Yeah, the general plan is the city's roadmap. So this is like the thing that they have to commit to and they're held accountable to make sure that they get these plans into action in the community. So having an environmental justice element will make sure that there is justice in this community. We'll be pursuing fairness together and they're held accountable to it, which is incredible. The environmental justice element is the only place in a general plan that talks about food access in a community. And so if you are concerned about that issue of food access, like here's the moment. If you're concerned about access to parks, if you're concerned about safe and sanitary housing, all of that's covered in the environmental justice element, specifically prioritizing folks that have been marginalized and left out of these kinds of actions. So check out your city's general plan, wherever you're living, see if they have an environmental justice element, and then sign up for those newsletter updates. They're required to let you know when things are up for public comment. And so if there is an environmental justice element, then you'll get notified about it. I love signing up for every single newsletter whenever someone offers. So I definitely recommend that too, if you want to stay involved. Yeah, that's one piece of it. I know there's so much more.
Kamille, you're brave. You sign up for every newsletter in your inbox.
It's a lot.
Oh my. All that you said was really great. I'll just add, I think looking at our budgets, every value a city claims shows up in their budgets and their spending. So follow the money, push for equity-based budgeting. I think students can really learn a lot from cities' budgets and seeing maybe what it is that's missing in those budgets that they would like to work for. I think partnering within your school to have environmental justice curriculum, clean energy campaigns, different kinds of audits when it comes to your campus and how it could be better. That's another important role that students should focus on. I'm a little bit biased to air quality, so monitoring of the air is another important one that you can do and pay attention to what's happening in our region. And there is a role that you can play in just helping to inform your neighbors, whether you create a newsletter that Kamille signs up for to talk about, what's happening in your world. I think that's really important. And the more we can get environmental justice out and how it impacts every little aspect of where we live, it's important. It's not just, as I said before, words or a topic. It really is a lens, and not everybody has the same environmental justice lens due to their lived experience. So pass on what you learn and help others see.
Just to add on to my fellow panelists, an area of environmental justice. And this is very specific. I really appreciate the broader recommendations from everyone here. But an issue that I've been focused on recently is addressing the urban heat island effect in the Bay Area. And as my fellow panelists shared, cities were made by design, and the built environment has led to some very serious inequalities that lead to historically marginalized and under-resourced communities having higher rates of impervious surfaces, so concrete and asphalt, denser urban areas that can trap and store heat and radiate it out into the night, making it really hard for people to cool off. And oftentimes in these areas, there's less green space. We often find in wealthier communities, there are more trees. There's higher rates of tree canopy coverage. And so recently I've been diving into, through a data collection campaign this past summer, how we can work with local community organizations to implement cooling solutions in the areas that most need this. And I'd like to shout out a few organizations like, obviously, Climate Resilient Communities, but also Canopy, based in East Palo Alto, that's focusing on planting trees in communities that need them. And so, yeah, just to add on, there's so many opportunities to get involved with this work, but partnering with people in the communities that know how to address these issues and have been doing so for many years is a great place to start.
Thank you so much, all three of you, for this amazing insight. And I think it kind of frames how we think about environmental justice and how we also want to take action. Now we're going to move on to our Q&A. So we're going to open it up to our audience. Who, anybody has a burning question they want to ask, they can either raise their hand, open or unmute their mic and ask the question, or feel free to also drop it in the chat. And I actually think we have a question about students speaking at City Council. I think, Davina, you did answer that in the chat, but if anybody has anything to add about that, the question was, what does a student need to know about speaking at a City Council meeting?
I'll add just a little bit more, which is the time goes by very quickly. It feels very underwhelming too, because the rules are such that you cannot have a conversation. So you will just speak and they will listen. And if you have a card or write on a piece of paper your follow-up contact information, I would suggest passing that to the clerk to pass to the council members, or your email address is always a good one. But this is a long road to change. So don't feel like in that moment you're going to get the responses or hear the path forward in that moment. It really is building on those relationships and conversations.
Yeah, it's some of the most unhumanizing conversations you'll have. It's like that 2-minute public comment, but it really when CRC has an initiative that we want to bring to a certain city, we let our partners know we're going to this city. Here's a template of the 2-minute public comment. And then when you get 50 people in there being like, don't expand that Palo Alto airport, there's no reason to do that in East Palo Alto, like they didn't do it. There was unanimous, they immediately decided that evening that they were not going to expand the airport. So it's weird to do the first time, it's less weird the second time, and then when you get everyone together talking about it, that's when we see change happen. So definitely encourage the process. I feel compelled to share my screen and show you how to Google search it, but it really is just a Google search for your city name. City Council has a link to the agenda and how to submit public comment. So yeah, you got it, you can do it.
And really quickly, I would just add, bring your energy, bring your personality to the comment. Sometimes the energy in the chambers might be a little down. There might be council members who are obviously not paying attention because those meetings are long. But you can get their attention by being you. So I would say, don't focus on them, focus on what you're trying to say.
Yes, and also I've went to one where I've tried to go online and I've tried to give a public comment, but they just completely ignored me. So it's a horrible experience. Don't try going online. Some of these, like Burlingame says that, or I don't know where I heard it from, but if you attend it on Zoom and raise your hand, it does not work in Burlingame. So just try to go in person. It's always better in person.
Yeah, 100% echoing that. And then I also think like if that's not your role yet, like you don't want to go to city council, there's other options. Do you want to like start collecting those community stories so that way you can present them to CRC and we go to city council with you? Like there's other parts of this process. City council, your comment at city council is not the one and only solution to this. There's a lot of different support we need. And I think Julia spoke to like this heat resilience concern that you have and how you've been working with CRC and Canopy to make sure that we're telling the story robustly is like what we're going to take to city council eventually, or county council in North Fair Oak. So yeah. Any other questions for us?
So speaking of time moving quickly, we're approaching 6 o'clock and we have one other question for the panelists. But before we move on to that, I would love to get some additional feedback from our participants through a final exit poll. Molly, could you put that up? And we'll give you just a minute to answer these 3 questions. So, the first one is on a scale of 0 to 5, how interested are you in advocating at the local level through emails, letters, meeting attendance, or making public comments at meetings? And as Kamille said, it's not just public comments. There are lots of ways to get involved. The second question is on a scale of 0 to 5, how prepared do you feel to advocate at the local level through these and other methods? And then finally, which of the following do you think are the most important issues for school boards and/or local governments to address? And we're really eager to learn about which of these topics are of most interest to you. We can certainly work on providing some follow-up information so that you can take action and be connected to the organizations that are working on those issues. And we'll give you just another minute, less than a minute, another 10 seconds or so, and then we'll end the poll. All right, final 5 seconds. That's great. Thank you, guys. Audra, do you want to, actually, let me give a quick thanks to our sponsors again before we ask our final question. Once again, the event itself was sponsored by Peninsula Clean Energy, and we really appreciate the promotion partners who helped us get the word out about this. We realize that students are hard to schedule. You have lots of after-school activities. There were a number of people who registered for the event and will be sent the recording. Thanks, though, to the Office of Education, Actera, CCL, Silicon Valley Youth Climate Action, Citizens Environmental Council, and 350 Silicon Valley. And now on to our final question.
Yes, so our final question to end this amazing panel is, how do we encourage more students, especially in areas with the biggest environmental justice needs, to get involved?
I'd say meet people where they're at and bring them along. Just start talking. You can see who's hanging out at that Starbucks near your high school and maybe like just ask like, hey, do you want to go pick up trash on our way home today? Right. And like, let's have a conversation about what we're concerned about together. So that's kind of like the way we approach just getting more people involved in this work, is meet them where they're at and invite them to the table.
This is definitely a hard one for me because I think the question is, I think I have a mother hat and then I have an activist hat that says, I want folks to go to school, learn all they can, get really invested in who they want to be in the world and their environment and improving it. So those who are in areas with the biggest environmental justice needs, I want you to go to school. I want you to learn as much as you can so that you become powerful in the path that you choose, and encouraging more students. I mean, do what you can when you see something, see some, say something, I think they say, and be curious about the world around you and how you can make it a better place. And it doesn't have to be an entire group of people. It can just be one person in your world. As much as we talk about the climate crisis and relying on our youth to fix and help, I would say of the folks my age, it's our duty to do as much as we can while we can. So I want students to just learn and be curious and help improve their environment. And we've got some work to do still. And that's why I'm in the work that I do.
I would also add that programs like the ones that CRC has, bringing youth into the environment and educating them on the natural beauty of the environment, how to take care of the land, and developing a love for the planet that we're fighting for. I think education is a big part of this, and as is encouraging your friends and those around you to not overlook individual actions. As I said before, this issue is incredibly overwhelming and massive in scale, but even just a conversation such as the one Kamille suggested can have a lot of power. Even choosing to not eat meat for one meal, that has power. And so having these conversations and starting slow and building up, I think, is huge. That's what I would add.
Definitely, thank you. And I know this was a question that I asked, but I also will add that like advocacy comes in different forms. And I think especially with youth, we all have different avenues and outlets in the way we like to express ourselves. So if you like art, if you like music, if you like writing, you still have a avenue to use your voice and express concerns about this issue, even though it might not be super ordinary, but yeah, choose to express your voice in the way you like to.
Yeah, I see Zekin's question too, and I think this ties in nicely that sometimes you can work around your city jurisdiction and wait until they're ready. Asking community members what they want to see is what we do at CRC. At their community meetings to make sure that we're hearing those priorities, and then we present those priorities to city council, and they're like, wait, you're having conversations with our community, can we join? And then they come to the conversations and start hearing alongside. So that's happened for multiple projects, like a rain garden installation project we're doing in East Palo Alto. The city was the last to get involved, and they are major supporters of the work, but it's informed by the community. So there's lots of success just talking to each other and making sure we are listening closely. Sorry, Sarah, I'll hand it back to you.
No problem. I'm so appreciative of all of your comments and all of your insights. Special shout out to Audrey for moderating tonight's panel, and a very warm thank you to Davina, Julia, and Kamille for offering their insights as well. I really appreciate that. I also want to make sure that you all know that we have some resources to share, and we will send a follow-up email. There will be a recording of this webinar available online, and we'll send it to everyone who registered. We also maintain a list of youth advocacy organizations and city council links on our website, and we'll include that in the email. And we've just published a new solution in our ideas bank for school climate action initiatives. So we've included links to those in the chat, and we'll include links in that email. We will also provide some resources related to PCE's rebates, which may prove useful. And we wanted to share that there will be a town hall hosted by the Youth United for Community Action about remediation and risks at the ROMIC site. So we will provide additional information through that link in the chat on Instagram. Also, SSMC has recently convened a youth advisory committee and will be setting up our plans for the coming school year and follow up with additional information about meetings and dates at the end of summer. So thank you all for joining us today. Apologies for going a little bit past 6 o'clock. I appreciate you sticking with us, and I wish you all of the best. I hope to hear your stories about the advocacy efforts that you engage in the coming year. So thank you very much.